everyone, PushingUpRoses here, and welcome back to another breakdown of a children's horror show. This time we're revisiting Are You Afraid of the Dark and the Tale of the Doll Maker from Season 3, because this is the episode I remember seeing the most. It either reran more than other episodes, or the concept of the story impacted me so much as a child that it decided to live rent-free in my brain for the rest of time. Before we begin, let's discuss the main trope at hand. You might think it's going to be a scary doll trope based on the episode's title. Perhaps a murderous childhood companion has been possessed by an evil spirit. A classic. That's not where this story goes, however. This takes on a different trope, the alternate dimension trope. Sort of. It's more of a through the looking glass situation, but it does have a lot of similarities to an alternate dimension story. Not a favorite of mine, if I'm honest with you. Even when the Twilight Zone tackled the fourth dimension in Little Girl Lost, which I believe loosely inspired this episode, was on the weaker side to me, though I attribute that to the acting and this strange crab walk that cracks me up every time I see it. Maybe I can get into the fourth dimension if I walk like this. Let's take a closer look at the tale of the doll maker first, then I'll discuss its various strengths and weaknesses. As we begin, we are greeted by the Midnight Society. It's Betty Ann's turn to spin a tale. Her stories tend to be on the morbid side, though co-member Tucker thinks the concept of dolls is, in his own words, weak, and preemptively deems the story snoozeworthy.
Sometimes they're so lifelike that it's almost as if the doll maker took a person and shrunk him down to doll size.
Yeah, so lifelike, like Cabbage Patch Kids. That's what people look like, right? Our story begins in a quaint little countryside home. A girl named Melissa spends weekends there with her aunt and uncle and usually spends her days hanging out with the neighbor kid, Susan Henderson. But the house is vacant and her aunt tells her that the Hendersons moved. Melissa is confused and her aunt deflects.
Let's get you settled in. You must be famished.
Melissa's weekend is pretty much ruined now, and her aunt and uncle are not the most exciting of people.
Hurry up, sweetie. We don't want to be late for bingo.
Bingo!
Melissa bides her time by taking pensive rests on the tire swing.
I got some work to do on the septic tank. Want to lend a hand?
Sounds like fun, but no thanks.
More fun for me then. Melissa thinks she sees someone in the Hendersons' window, so she goes to investigate, thinking it could be Susan. And when I say investigate, I mean she wanders around saying hello a million different ways.
Hello? 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 Hello?
Even though the Hendersons have only been gone a couple months, the house looks rough. Why are there brown stains on the wall? Was it from the septic tank? Melissa finds an entrance to the attic, which houses this smaller house, a perfectly modeled dollhouse that resembles the Hendersons. How cute. Oh hey, I have that exact Renoir painting in my house. Well, almost exact. She's startled when she sees one of the doors in the dollhouse close on its own, but dismisses it as being a mouse. She is then drawn to this whimsical door, but before she can investigate further, she's interrupted by Aunt Sally, who demands they leave. She makes extra sure to lock the doors behind them. She tells Melissa to stay out because the Hendersons asked her to keep watch over the house, something she takes very seriously.
They left a lot of precious things behind.
Like their daughter. When Melissa presses her aunt for more information on Susan, she just panics and runs away. Literally runs away.
The Hendersons didn't just move away.
They're on the lam. She explains that Susan disappeared, and despite several searches, they had no luck finding her. The Hendersons decided they couldn't live in the house as it was too upsetting. They decided to keep it in case she does come back. Later that night, Melissa overhears Uncle Pete tell Aunt Sally she should have been honest about Susan's disappearance.
I didn't want to ruin her weekend.
So I took her to bingo. It's fun for the whole family.
Bingo?
It was the house that got her.
Baba Yaga strikes again. In the middle of the night, Melissa hears Susan calling out to her. She wakes up and sees the door in the attic open. Remember earlier when Aunt Sally rushed Melissa out of the house and locked the doors? Well, it doesn't matter because she puts the keys to the house right above Melissa's bed. They aren't even in a separate room, they're in plain sight. Melissa notices light coming through the colorful door, and when she opens it, it leads to another dimension where Susan is wandering around aimlessly. She tries to go through the door but is tackled by Uncle Pete, who shows her the door just leads to a fatal fall. Who in the world decided to put a door here? It's like straight out of the Winchester house. The next day at breakfast, Melissa desperately tries and fails to eat her bread with a fork. Aunt Sally tells Melissa that Pete is going to board up the door, much to her disappointment. She tries to explain what she saw, but Aunt Sally is incredulous. Melissa is worried and says if Uncle Pete boards up the door, Susan will never be able to leave. Yep, just gonna go bash in the septic tank. Melissa decides to break into the house one last time, and I do mean that literally. I know this is a children's show, but I don't think I've ever seen such a low-energy glass breaking scene. It's followed by this low-energy taking a board off a door scene. Great job, Uncle Pete. Did you stick these up there with sticky tack or something? She She uses a ball of twine to track her steps, even though there is only one hallway and a few rooms. Ooh, I love this novelty-sized salt shaker. Really gives the house a seasoned look. As she looks around, she suddenly hears loud thudding. She realizes that she is in the dollhouse after Aunt Sally enters the room. She's either looking for Melissa or quietly reconsidering her marriage. She calls out to Aunt Sally but is unsuccessful in getting her attention. Suddenly, Susan speaks up as she was sitting in this ugly-ass chair.
What's wrong with you? You look just like...
Bret Michaels. Susan is turning into a doll and is losing her ability to communicate verbally, but she's able to say the attic. Melissa says yes, she will get her back to her parents' attic. Whoops-a-doodle, the portal closed. So much for that twine. She notices her arms turning into porcelain and starts to panic. She suddenly remembers that the dollhouse is a replica of the real house and tries to find the attic. Oh wow, I had this exact raccoon figurine at my old house. It's actually an outdoor decoration and there's a few to the set, but I guess it can go on a shelf if you're feeling sassy. True story, I got extremely distracted while writing this breakdown because I had to stop and image search this damn raccoon, hoping I would find the ones I had in the backyard, but I couldn't find them. I could not find them. Truly the darkest timeline. Melissa finds the attic in the dollhouse and somehow gets Susan up there despite her current state. Oh no. Need a hand? Wouldn't it be great if this dollhouse just led to an even smaller dollhouse and it just kept going until you have a dollhouse for ants? Also, this happens. Melissa really can't seem to get a handle on the situation. She is confused that the dollhouse door leads to the Hendersons' actual backyard, but this swirly distortion overlay comforts her and she and Susan fall into it. Without any visual to show where they ended up, the episode cuts back to a visibly distraught Pete and Sally. They are then overjoyed when they see Melissa running towards the house. Pause for wave. And Susan is okay. Cool, let's get you out of that ugly thing you're wearing. Right, let's talk about this. My initial thought was, wow, I can't believe I found this frightening when I was young, though that porcelain hand is pretty freaky. My second thought was that the logic of the story is non-existent, and I know, it's a show for kids. I know it doesn't need to be grounded in reality. I just believe that kids are intelligent and deserve smart stories. Think about it this way, as an adult, you'd be disappointed if, say, an episode of The Twilight Zone was poorly written, so I believe in having a similar standard of quality for children. I think this was a really good concept to bring to the table, but I do feel like there's a lot of holes that ultimately makes it suffer. Betty Ann says that dolls are made by doll makers, which I suppose is a little nebulous. A maker doesn't have to be a person, it can be a machine. But if you want my opinion, I think when most people hear the word doll maker, they do think of a person that makes dolls. But in this story, the dollhouse is the maker of all dolls, which are made from real-life children, which is a terrifying concept all on its own. So that's all well and good, but then I get a little confused at the inclusion of this alternate dimension. Is it only accessible through specifically made dollhouses designed to look like the owner's real house? How does the portal open? How does this work? In Little Girl Lost, the fourth dimension is available via a portal in the wall, but that portal opens and closes and there's only one way in and out. That makes sense to me. In The Tale of the Doll Maker, you have a door in the attic that leads to the dollhouse dimension. The main portal closes, and to get out, you go through the dollhouse attic that pops you out somewhere? Presumably somewhere in the house, since that's where Susan walks out. It almost makes sense, but my brain is starting to hurt trying to comprehend the logistics. I still wish the dollhouse attic would have led to a smaller dollhouse. That would have been truly frightening. I also wish Susan would have had an extra hand in her pocket. That would have been a great ending. I think my brain is just getting stuck trying to distinguish the main narrative. For some reason, I don't like the combination of both. My brain wants to focus on either dolls are just small children, or I want to analyze this other dimension aspect that turns you into a doll, then traps you there for all eternity. I think instead of accidentally wandering through a portal, the story would benefit from an eccentric artist who lures kids into his workshop so he can occupy his dollhouse with quality figurines. Something out of The Seventh Guest, if you're familiar with that story. The episode could be a lot more frightening with just a few tweaks and a more direct focus. I'm not saying there isn't room for a mysterious element that challenges the viewer to fill in the gaps with their imagination. I just don't think it works here. There's too many gaps. It's my personal opinion that in the world of literature, short stories, and fictions, if you have to keep digging for explanations, then maybe the story hasn't successfully gotten its point across. Betty Ann explains that Uncle Pete burns down the dollhouse and the kids question where the attic door might lead now. And yeah, same. I want to know that too. When writing stories like this, you have to find the sweet spot between spelling everything out for your reader or viewer and suggesting things a little more vaguely, and that can be a hard spot to find. I suppose you could argue that this isn't really a parallel universe of her story at all, but instead perhaps the dollhouse is just an evil entity that traps children within its bowels. But I didn't get any indication that it was anything like that. I didn't even get any hints that it was haunted. It's just a location you're spit out in after going through this portal, and your body changes to adapt to the universe. It's unclear whether the dollhouse is affecting Susan, or the portal changed her as soon as she entered it, but either way, I don't think it's totally wrong to call this an alternate dimension trope. Hey everyone, Roses from the editing room here. Okay, so there is in fact a more obvious hint that it could be the dollhouse, and that's when Uncle Pete says,
It was the house that got her.
but I do feel like this entire scene is kind of vague. Does he mean the dollhouse or the real house, specifically the attic with the magic door? I think that's where a lot of the confusion stems for me. We're mostly led to believe that the door is magical or that it leads somewhere, but then the blame is shifted to the dollhouse when Uncle Pete burns it. When Betty Ann questions where the door might lead next, it implies that Uncle Pete made the wrong decision and that the portal is still there, waiting to spit someone else out in another location, perhaps yet another dimension or a location that coexists with ours. The episode almost gets there but falls short for me, even if that hand scene is a bit disturbing. If you want a fourth dimension story, I recommend Little Girl Lost from the Twilight Zone, despite the questionable acting. And if you want something in the young adult fiction genre, one that more resembles this episode, I recommend reading The Dollhouse Murders by Betty Wren Wright. Let me know your thoughts. Is this episode too dodgy, or am I just being salty, like this comically small yet oversized for its setting salt shaker? Until next time, stay spooky. Hey everyone, thanks again for watching this breakdown of The Tale of the Doll Maker. Time to ramp up the spooky content as we approach Halloween. If you want more videos from me, I have plenty, but first I want to give a quick shout out and thank you to my humble patrons who are patient with me when my Patreon postcards are a week late. If you want to support this channel, please consider donating to my campaign, and if you could hit that like button and leave a witty comment, that would also help me battle the obscure demon that is the YouTube algorithm. Want to see more videos before making a decision? That is fair and recommended. Here's a couple of suggestions. On the right, I have the first episode breakdown I did on Are You Afraid of the Dark? And on the left, I have an off-the-rails episode breakdown of everyone's favorite kid-friendly horror franchise, Goosebumps. Thanks again, and as always, I will see you in the next one.